One might think that it's easy for a priest to go to confession. After all, it would seem like everybody is, you're always around priests and bishops and whatnot. But that's not been my experience. Because normally, until just this placement, I was out in Casey, Greenup, and Marshall. And the next priest was about 25 minutes away from where I was living. And then when I was over at Gillespie, Beneld, and Collinsville, I was about 15 minutes away, a good 15 minutes away from the nearest priest. And so it was like, okay, that's not very easy. I have to make a point to go out and see this person. And normally if I'm going out, I don't just bump into them. And if I'm going out with them for like a Cardinals game or a meal, it's just kind of awkward to say, hey, why don't we take a time out and let's do confession? But then, then there's the time where, if I'm have a bunch of other priests, like we're at our priestly powwow in September, then you're always kind of busy and you don't have time for confession either. And so what ended up, at least for me, was to go pretty much twice a year when I was visiting my parents. And so that was going on until about 2 years ago when I decided, for whatever reason, I decided that I would take to heart the Fatima message and fulfill the 5 first Saturdays, where you go to confession, you then receive communion, you pray the rosary and meditate 15 minutes on the mystery of the rosary. And that was part of the Fatima message. You do that in reparation for the sins against her Immaculate Heart, and she will provide you with all the graces needed for salvation at the moment of death. And so I thought, I'm going to commit myself to that. And so every Saturday morning, I'd call the local priest nearby, ring them up, or maybe on Friday, and say, can you meet with me for confession? So I'd travel up to 15 minutes, sometimes more, and then travel back. And it was a real difficult process because Saturday is not a free day for a priest. I'm coming up with my homily. Oftentimes we have a funeral. Sometimes we have a wedding. And yet I did it each and every week. And what I found was a difference in my spiritual life between going that twice a year when I visited my parents and making a point to do it each and every week. That each and every week was a pilgrimage, saying that I'm going to put everything else on hold and go confess my sins. And the thing that I recognized of the difference too is that I wasn't striving before. Take, for example, a sin that a lot of us commit, cursing. I stub my toe or something doesn't go exactly the way I want, and all of a sudden I cuss. If I go twice a year, I was like, what's the chance that I'm going to cuss again in the next 6 months? It's probably a pretty good bet. So don't worry about it. Don't even worry about going about it. You'll confess it, and before you get 5 minutes outside the confessional, you'll probably cuss again because I'm driving home and someone cut me off. But if I'm only going every month, then the question that I raised to myself is, why did you? You couldn't have made it a month without cussing? Why? Are you even trying? And even if I say, then the answer sometimes come back is, no, I'm not trying because I kind of like cussing. I don't want to give it up. And then the prayer becomes, Lord, change my heart and look into myself why I don't want to give this up. In the end, the call to repentance that John the Baptist is giving to the people is the call that's given to all of us in this Lenten Advent journey of repentance. He's calling the men and women who are going out to him that they're making a point to go out to see this man in the middle of the desert and be baptized while they confess their sins. And they're not doing that just here it is, look at me. They're going there for a change of life, to receive the grace to become a better follower of God. And yet contrast that with the Pharisees and Sadducees who are going there, well, because they're religious leaders and they don't want to look bad. And so here they are standing off, or maybe they'll just go and be baptized, but there's no interior change of heart. And that's why he calls them a brood of vipers. He says, give some evidence of your repentance. And that's really the question. Do we have some evidence of our repentance? As we come here in this Advent journey, it's a time for us to prepare for the coming of the Lord, to give some example of our repentance, to give some example of a change of heart, to give some example that we are striving to follow Jesus Christ. It's easy to just sit back and say, okay, well, I'll do the external things. I'll just put up the nativity scene. I'll put up some Christmas decorations. And then in 3 weeks, we'll have Christmas and we'll go back to the way things were. This Advent season and this gospel reading calls us all to strive, to not take it for granted, to not do the same thing we've done once before, to look inside ourselves and say, what am I going to do specifically to change, to be a better follower of Jesus today than I was yesterday? And if we can do that, then we will be ready, truly, for when Christmas comes. We'll be ready, truly, when our life is over. We'll be ready, truly, when Jesus Christ comes again.